Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik. What if the hiring system was never really designed to clearly show your value? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the hidden mechanics of recruitment with someone who has sat on the inside of that process. My guest is Megan Applegate, and this conversation is all about what really happens in those first few seconds, why so many qualified people get filtered out, and how to stop applying blindly and start positioning yourself strategically. Megan is a former recruiter, career strategist, and the founder of Career Blueprint Solutions. Megan, welcome, and thanks for joining today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to join, and anytime I can talk to a fellow hotelier with all my experience, I'm excited to do so.
So, Megan, you've seen the hiring process from the inside. What is one truth about recruitment that most professionals still misunderstand?
Um, I think that a lot of times people think that their resumes are either accepted or rejected. And if I think about, that when before I got into the recruiting world, I think I thought the same thing. I mean, I hear it all the time. It's like, well, my resume it's rejected if it's not optimized correctly. And that's actually a myth. The ATS system is built is more of a filter and an organization. And so it's not necessarily that your resume doesn't make it in or gets rejected and the system's like, nope, you're not coming in. It's really about how once it does come in, we call it parsing into our ATS system. It's about how it gets positioned, organized, and filtered, right? So the idea is that we understand what creates a good format so that when your resume does get parsed into the system, it it basically falls into what we call kind of like different sections, right? So you've got education, you've got your skills, and the most important is your contact information and experience. So if it's optimized to basically, sit in that order, then then you shouldn't have a problem in terms of whether it's being seen or not. And I feel like a lot of people get that one wrong.
Yeah. Now, for our international audience, could you just clarify the acronym ATS, what it stands for?
Applicant tracking system. Yep.
Okay.
So it's basically, a built system that most HR companies or recruiters, agency recruiters utilize to organize their candidates. So it's used a lot for hiring. Obviously, that's the biggest thing because when somebody applies to a job, typically that job is built in the ATS. And then that way, when people are applying, their candidates are coming in, they're being filtered. Other ways HR utilizes it to just like manage their own employees. And so that's usually
Yes.
what it's used for.
Okay, great. You often talk about the job search feeling like a black box. What is actually happening behind the curtain that candidates never get to see?
Um, I think that they don't understand like what happens to, I call it the resume journey. Right. And so going back to talking about the ATS system, like I said, it's not a reject or an accept. It's really what are the three things in this? We'll talk about this, and this is kind of how I created the TAP protocol, but it really has to do with can you get into the ATS? So we've got to beat the machine. Then there is a recruiter, basically, that's going to scan your resume in about 6 seconds. Then, if you're lucky enough to get into that top 10%, then you actually will have your resume read by the hiring manager. And so I think that there's, an understanding of that really kind of helps clarify and have some clarity for candidates to learn that, because if you don't understand kind of the journey, then you can't really figure out how to create or put together a resume so that you are really kind of attacking those three in a way where we want to make sure it gets into the ATS by formatting. We want to make sure that there's scannability when it gets to an actual recruiter. And then, the human piece, then when you actually get a hiring manager to read it, then, you're selling them. So that's, I think, a huge misunderstanding. And, looking at it from how do you actually scan a resume, right? Like, I don't think anyone taught me to do that. I think that when you look at resumes day in and day out all the time, like we do, there is just like this certain kind of way that your brain kind of filters out things and looks for things. So things like utilizing white space, using, bolds and some section headers and making it actually visually appealing without being crazy. You don't want graphs everywhere and all kinds of things, but if it looks presentable, it looks professional, and you like that to the eye, I'm looking for things that I can pick up very quickly to understand what your level is, how much experience you have, what your background is, the companies you've worked for, because it's going to basically boil down to like, and this is obviously an average, but let's just say 100 resumes come into our ATS for this one job that I'm recruiting for, and you make it into the top 20. I am then going to take that 20% and I'm going to scan them all. And then you're either a yes or a no, right? And you want to be in the yes pile so that way you eventually get into the hiring managers, profile view so that they can actually read it. So I feel like understanding that in itself, is what I try and, coach my candidates and my clients that I work with, whether it's recruiting and helping them that way or the resume writing. Because once you understand that, I think it's a little bit more easy to move forward with that idea.
Sure. I picked up on something you said, 6 seconds. 6 seconds. So is
hmm
that initially the resume is you make it, or you're in the no you're dropped in first 6 seconds? That's what's happening.
Yeah, it is. It
Wow.
is. And yeah, and I mean, and that's part of the equation, right? Where, we used to be kind of taught to list everything we've ever done.
Yeah.
And, job duty after job duty and bullet points and so many. And so a lot of people that I see resumes, they're 4 or 5 pages long. And
Yeah.
it really comes down to, right now we're in a really competitive market for looking for jobs, right? That just is what it is. So what happens is the volume is kind of what trains us to be like, I I only want to know what's relevant to what you've applied to. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But,
Yeah.
I don't need to know, don't put references, don't put hobbies. Just really, even if you have to take out some roles that are not relevant to what you're doing, you know, I need to be able to find what I'm looking for within 2 pages, typically within two
Yeah.
pages. So that like I can just keep going. And it's, I hate to say that. I feel like it's cliche to say, that really happens, but being in that seat, it really happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you already gave some excellent tips for somebody potentially who's looking for a new assignment. So that's great. You argue that many strong candidates are rejected before a human ever really sees them from them. What are the most common invisible mistakes that trigger that outcome? You mentioned something already, but maybe you want to
Yeah,
expand
I
on this
mentioned a
idea.
little bit. I think that again, if it goes back to starting with the ATS before you get to the recruiter, like we can kind of dive a little bit more into that format, right? And so the formatting is a huge piece because, like I said, again, if you think about like it almost like a funnel, right? Like there's this long list of 100 candidates. You beating getting the format right first is number one. But I think you also have to keep in mind that it's not just about the formatting. You really need to make sure you are almost playing a matching game to what that job description is saying. So one of the very big things I coach my candidates on and clients is that you almost have to study the job description, Don't just hit apply, apply, apply. I think that's the biggest mistake people do, right? And like really figure out, okay, so what are they trying to say they need? What are those key skills they're saying? And if you can start to play that matching game, where that's where the AI, right, comes in to play now, where it's almost kind of it's a game a little bit of like, can I match my background without obviously making things up or lying to truly what it is that that job description is saying. And if you can do both of those very well, that's what will get you into that top 20%.
Okay. On your site, you frame the resume as a sales document rather than a memoir. I know I have done that for my first job, so I tried to write memoirs, but clearly it was not would not work in today's market. But what does the shift really require from someone who is used to describing experience instead of a positioning value?
Sure. I think that, like we kind of touched on, I mean, most of us, especially within a certain age demographic that's, full 40 and over, will just say that, you're taught one way, that it really just becomes a history of everything you've done. And there's been a really big shift to more of a future forward thinking thought process, right? And instead of it being something that you're just like, well, here's everything I've ever done, you're really, again, going back to understanding what the problems are that the job that you would potentially take on has. Right. And if you can kind of like uncover what the unwritten, pain points are for what you're looking to apply to, then you can create your narrative and your story about actually being a sales document versus, like you said, a history, right? A memoir
Yeah.
of how are you positioning yourself to solve those problems, right? And instead of it being like, we don't need to know everything, I honestly encourage people 3 to 4 bullet points under each job, description in total. You want people to know, um, kind of the level that you're at. If you're in management, how many people have you led? From a hotel point of view, what I deal with, like, is it full service? Is it luxury? Is it select service? Like, what kind of level are you at? But really, it boils down to understanding who your audience is, right? Who are
Yeah.
you actually talking to? And understanding that before you even sit down to write a resume and think about job strategy, it's about understanding your expertise, what you're really good at, your thought leadership and the problems that you solve. And the biggest mistake I feel people make is not taking the time to truly write that down as they happen in the jobs. And then you go back to writing a resume, 5 years in, and you're like, well, I have no idea. Where I'm like, I need like actual metric driven data to help you kind of position you in a way that we can show your success. And then we're just pulling at straws because people are not taking the time to like understand that they need to be recognizing that when they're going through it in their jobs, and updating resumes as they go.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm interested, what was the breaking point for you the moment you stopped seeing hiring as a process to work within and started seeing it as a system that needed to be decoded? And how did that become that foundation for that framework you call, is it TAP?
The tap protocol. Yeah. Yep.
That TAP protocol. Yeah, tell
Yep.
us about
So
that.
you're right. So the TAP protocol kind of came about to me. And again, this goes back to kind of two different versions of what I try and do, with my candidates and clients, is that, again, you have to understand it from two different points of view. One is that resume journey, right? And the other is truly from a full variation or version of what a job search strategy actually looks like, because there really is skills and a strategy when it comes to job, searching. So TAP protocol, is created, it's talent acquisition, ATS, and then people pitch is kind of like how I look at that. Like, again, the talent acquisition is the part that you really have to understand what it is that you want to do. And you have to get very clear about the next jobs that you want and what that 3 to 5 year goal looks like. Because if you're sitting just in your past, then we're not thinking about being future forward. So, like that piece first. And then, the ATS, I mean, again, that's not going away. That's really anything that has to do with automation and AI and that system. I mean, that's a huge part of what we have to tackle, like it or not, right? And then the people pitch piece is really comes down to when you have the ability to truly get in front of either a hiring manager. And first, you've got to do it with your resume because that's the first thing they're going to see, is to really sell them um, and why they want to hire you within that top 1/3 of your resume. And then on the search strategy, it's really then boiling down to like, how are you selling yourself in an interview? So it's kind of looking at all those. And my kind of breaking point in that question that you asked was like, again, when I was in hotels for 20 years in catering and sales. So, I didn't work on the HR side. I didn't have anything to do with really recruitment. And so when I decided that I was kind of done with like the I call it kind of the meat and potatoes of like the actual job I was doing, but I absolutely loved the industry, and which is kind of how I ended up sidestepping into finding the ability to stay in hospitality in recruitment, is that I realized people again, just don't have the knowledge. They just don't see it. And then I thought, well, I didn't see it either, right? Like I had no idea prior to being a recruiter what it is. And so understanding that, I felt like there was a big hole in knowledge and in gap in a space that I could dive in and really, help people understand what they needed to do. Um, I think it goes back to a little bit what I've kind of already touched on, and that is the people pitch kind of like part of it, right? You can, these days AI can kind of give you an idea of what the format needs to be with a resume. And with that, usually if you get that kind of piece right, then the scannability, which is, the recruiter piece, kind of falls into place. But I think people's biggest still hurdle is really understanding that they need to sell themselves and create a narrative and signal to people that they are a problem solver and understand really deep down what those problems are that you solve. Because our career history is just that. It's like, once you're kind of out of it, it's almost like, yeah, I did that, but that was 10 years ago. It's to understand that these days, you know, because it's so automated driven, it has to be. And I know we're going to like touch on that a little bit too, is that you have to get really good at understanding what you do best, what your expertise, and sell yourself literally in the top 1/3 of your resume. And that's something I like to help people with again. And when you think about the format, there's format when we talk about um, how you build it so for the ATS, but there's another format, not another format, but the same kind of the mindset of how you format your resume comes into play when we think about if I were to literally fold your resume into a third, right? That top third should truly be how you sell yourself so that no one should even have to read the rest. Meaning like they might need to know your history of your experience, but you were basically telling them why they have no other option but to hire you because you're already telling them how you solve their problems. And so, that's thinking about things like, okay, so a lot of times I don't see people do like a title on a resume. They have contact information. You should have your LinkedIn profile or your URL linked. You should have a clear title so people understand what even industry, because that helps psychologically totally understand immediately what you do. I usually tell people put like 3 key essential skills right under that title, because then that helps, again, somebody like me just like truly understand what you do best. Then you have your professional profile summary, which again, that is kind of like we think about that value proposition statement. We're just saying, here's what I do, here's how long I've been doing it, here's who I do it for, here's the problems I solve. It's that kind of thought process, very short to the point, 3 to 4 sentences at most. Then you move into more of a key accomplishment section, which again, this is short. You should be picking 2 to 3 of your top things that you're most proud of in any problem solving way, so that I don't have to go searching for those. They might be on a second page, two jobs back. So kind of putting that immediately at the top. Then after that, you've got your skills section. And I see a lot of people kind of put that at the end. But again, that almost should be like compartmentalized, where you have 3 different categories and 4 bullet points under each. So it's very clean. And then so like those 4 things right there should be selling you before anyone even reads your experience. So looking at like that kind of point of view really changes the game from just being average, where you're just kind of along with everybody else, where you're generalist of everything, where you're actually being, poignant and very specific and targeted about who you're selling to.
So, Megan, I have this maybe uncomfortable question, but do you believe the hiring system is actually built to find the best talent, or is it mostly built to reduce risk and manage volume?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that I don't believe honestly that it's one or the other. I think it's both. And I say that because I think that it's built for volume when it comes to kind of that middle management role, right? Where, you have the people that are doing the same thing, and you can kind of go out and hand pluck those from one company to the next. They're kind of following the same thing, right? So because of that, and because of right now, we're in a time where the job market is very competitive for candidates, which, and also because um, it's so easy, that made it so easy to apply to jobs, right? I mean, you can just like, there's even, I think somebody was telling me about some kind of bot, or I don't know, some kind of AI, type of thing, where you can tell it what you want and it will like literally go out and like apply for jobs for you. And I'm like, that's crazy, right? Like, because all that is doing is flooding these poor recruiters with thousands of resumes that for people that aren't even like slightly qualified. And because that's getting so easy, you have almost no choice to put some automation and take out some of that humanness, because otherwise we just can't handle it. So I think for
Yeah.
those kind of positions, it's necessary, with the way that technology is going. But on the other side of that, I also feel like there's still a need for somebody like me from an agency recruiter point of view that needs to have um, more of that headhunter authenticity type of thought process, right? Where you're going and looking for what we like to call like a purple unicorn, right? Like where that can't come through, automation. That actually has to be headhunted and found and looked for, where, you as a person and your uniqueness still matters before the ATS and applying to millions of jobs does, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So when recruiters say that they want authenticity, but the system rewards keyword alignment, polished positioning, and strategic narrative, are candidates being hired for who they are, or for how well they perform the game?
Um, that question again, I would also say both, right? Because again, you have to look at it in 2 different ways. I mean, there's to beat the system and to be able to like understand, like I teach my candidates to do and clients to be like, okay, here's how you get into the ATS. Here's how you can be scanned. Here is how you have the ability to write a resume so that you can get in front of somebody. So you have to have that because if without that, then you can't get to the end piece. The end piece looks more like now I actually have a chance to um, show my authentic self. And that comes when you actually get a chance to be face to face and interview with somebody, right? Where you now actually have a personality versus just a piece of paper. And you have the
Yeah.
ability to kind of show, who you are, why somebody would hire you. And again, goes back to the problems that you solve and the communication style that you have and how articulate you can be. So I think that the best of the best has the ability to do both.
Yeah. You speak about recruiter certainty and executive assent in your view. What separates a genuinely high valued candidate, uh, the purple unicorn, right, from
Right.
someone who simply knows how to package themselves well?
Yes, this is one of my favorite ones to tackle because truthfully, the days of us just thinking, okay, we're gonna like we got good credentials, we've got tenure, we've got career progression, we've got great companies we work for that people would recognize. We have a degree that actually is in our profession. As long as we have that, then I'm good, right? And that kind of again goes back to being kind of a generalist to everything, and instead of being like, I'm strategic and I'm a thought leader. And so, what I like to tell people and coach people on is really it comes down to if you can package yourself, great. But is anyone actually finding you? Right? Like, can anyone even like, as a recruiter, do I find you on LinkedIn? Are you, networking? Are you doing all these things? So really pinpointing, um, in constantly creating up, developing your actual professional brand is super important these days because that will not only help you in this job search now, but it will help you down the road. So my whole goal for people is to learn that, no one likes to job search. It can be emotionally hard and draining and just taxing all around. It's like a full-time job these days. So if you can create your own professional brand that includes your resume, includes, a cover letter, includes your LinkedIn presence, and and you make sure you are signaling to the jobs that you want, not just the people that are going to come to you saying, would you be willing to leave this to do the same thing? Right? Like you really want to think about, again, that goes back to that future forward thinking about what does that next job look like for me, and how am I signaling that those opportunities are just coming to me? I almost think about like you're manifesting, right? Like if we want to like think about it that way, to be like, how can I put out in the world and signal with what I'm saying? And it doesn't need to be like every day all the time, but if you can jump on LinkedIn, make sure that profile is put together, is optimized, has everything, even come down to like the banner graphic behind your picture, that signifies that you are fully professional, you have a brand. And then find out what you think, again, your experiences, your expertise is, and have a voice. I really think that
Yeah.
if you can have a voice. You don't need to be posting every day, but if you can just comment on some things once a week, have something that you want to say, have some relevance, know how to network, and be constantly thinking about that, that is what separates people from being, a high value. And one other thing I just kind of popped in my mind I wanted to say, I think you and I had kind of touched on this when we first talked, is know your market value. I think that is one of the biggest pieces that people miss is understanding what are you worth? Because when it comes down to it, we're buying, right? Like that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, if you kind of understand what you bring to the table, what's that price tag, um, then it really sets you apart and you go into deals, not just kind of like, well, I think that I want this, but you're like, I know this is what I'm worth and this is what it's going to take to get me to make a move. And when you can kind of firmly stand on that ground and have reasoning, don't just say it. You need to back it up with, like hard evidence. If you can do all of those, you really will have an advantage above everybody else at this point.
Yeah. Also, I mean, just maybe you can add a little bit more on what you just mentioned about the importance of your personal brand and your how you come how you present yourself professionally, and you're on LinkedIn. What are sort of some no-nos that someone should be paying attention to? Because social media is ruthless. I mean, if you're visible in a very different way than you say you're like I'm in a nice bow tie here on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and then
Right.
I'm something else on TikTok, but not that's and
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
always somebody who will. So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about that. What your tips are?
Sure. Yeah. So, LinkedIn is, hate it or leave, hate it or don't, it is what it is. It's almost like your job matching. Like it's almost like a dating website, right? For jobs in a way. And so in order for you to be perceived as professional, it's in I hate to say it, but like it's even just saying, okay, this person they actually are put together, have a professional look about them, and you will get chosen over somebody that doesn't. And again, you have to think about that, especially as competitive as it is, that if you can at least put that together, have a good headline. That's super important if we're talking specifically about LinkedIn. That, a picture, the no-nos are a picture with sunglasses, your best friend with you, your dog with you. I mean, then I'm like, which one is Megan, right? And people are just like, or don't have a picture at all. That just signals to me that there's something either that you're hiding for some reason, or
Yeah,
you're just not caring enough to actually have a presence that's professional. So LinkedIn is huge for that. Have an about section, feature your resume, have your jobs filled out. It doesn't take long to do that. I will be honest, whenever I get a new resume, I'm going to look you up. I just am. Right. And it's instinct to kind of put a face with like, okay, like who is this person representing? Because I'm looking at a piece of paper. And again, that's hard to really understand. Like you can do all the things that we've been talking about that I've been saying. Right. But then if are you have a profile on LinkedIn, but like there's nothing to it. There's no picture. There's not much filled out. Then it's kind of like these aren't matching, right? And so it's super important for that to happen to like give you that like leg up. And the other thing, like you're kind of alluding to, like not only LinkedIn, but the other pieces of social media, like I get that you should have a way in some regards to be yourself. And I think that you can. But it's just, understanding you get to a certain professional level and what you give off to the world is how you be perceived. Right. And so when we're young and we're in our 20s and, we're just having, the best time and posting all kinds of crazy pictures, like that unfortunately will come back and bite you. And if that's really what you need, then don't make your profile public. Right. Like
yeah.
you can just have it for your friends, or, send certain people that crazy video that you just so proud of doing. I don't know. But it is true. I mean, I don't think people understand that enough. As unfair as it may seem, it is reality.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, and we had to have some a great conversation, and you have some absolute gold nuggets here for the audience and for me too, by the way. So I keep learning. I like to learn, still learn, even though I reach a certain level in my life and career. But this is all good. So I have just two questions, and before we move on to our final segments, one is that. Besides what we have talked about, what are maybe some trends do you see happening in hospitality recruitment that hoteliers should take note of now?
I think there's a couple. I think that making sure your brand, especially for small companies that don't have a lot of, the luxury of being marketed and for being specific about, the hotel world. I mean, of course, everyone knows the Hilton and the Marriott brand. They've done a great job. They have a whole team that markets that. But if you're like a smaller boutique or luxury that's got, a handful of portfolio of hotels or really anything that is hospitality that's a little bit more small business, um, really making sure your digital narrative is on point and really,
Yeah.
signals who you are is important because these days, as competitive is the job market, and we're all kind of vying for our position there, it's also just as important as the actual employer to have a digital narrative that like describes truly who you are, has a great voice, has a good um visual appearance to it, right, that like attracts your top tier. Because if you're just medium and in the middle, then that's the type of talent that you're going to have. So I think
Yeah.
that would be one thing. I think people are also looking more for specialized, like hybrid type of skill sets these days versus just your general manager, right? Like we
Mm.
used to kind of be like if you're a generalist, you're great of a little bit, but not really specialized. That's starting to change a little bit too from what I'm seeing, where people are like, okay, especially with the technology piece, you've not only can you manage a team and run everything like in the way it needs to be, but like how else are you specialized in revenue management and processes, and the tech enabled type of things. So I think that's one. Something else that I think it might be a little bit more on the back burner, but I've seen it in a few instances so far, um, is somebody that's looking more for a fractionalized role. And when I say that, I mean if you're looking more at that C-level suite, they're potentially taking a full-time high paid salary and departmentalizing who can I contract from like that strategic point of view that can come in from a more of a fractional leader and strategize within that very specific department at that C-level suite, where then you've got more of that really deeper knowledge that can be learned, and but then you are kind of not having somebody that's carrying that heavy salary permanently. So I don't know that I think that that's like now, but I do start to see, people specializing in that and really pitching that to companies as, part of what they've been able to do, especially since COVID, where people got really, they lost
Yeah.
jobs, but they had this very specific knowledge point. They've been upskilling that all of that. And so now they have even more specialized way to help. So I think, we might not see it yet as a whole, but I do feel like that's coming down the pipeline pretty soon.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so then finally, before we go get to our final segment, if people are interested to reach out to you, how can they do so? Website, emails, connection on LinkedIn, etc.
Yep. So, my LinkedIn is probably where I live the most. So that is my name, Megan Applegate, CPC. And so you can find me there. And that really kind of highlights the kind of both businesses that I'm in, from the recruiting and from the career development, right? Resume writing and coaching. So careerblueprintsolutions.com is my website, where if you're an individual looking more for that one-on-one, kind of coaching mentality to help you with resume writing, really anything from jobs or strategy, I can write a 3, 5, 10 year plan, We can get into interviewing skills because that in itself is a whole nother conversation. So that is kind of where you can find me there. Again, career blueprintsolution.com. And then the other side, if you are more of a company or a candidate that is looking for recruitment help, geckohospitality.com is who I partner with and work for. We are nationwide, and I say that in the United States. We do actually have a couple of offices in the UK and in Canada, but we can help really any kind of hospitality company with headhunting services, recruiting services, or for, like I said, from a candidate point of view, find their future dream home.
Terrific.
Yeah,
Very good. So, Megan, before we fully wrap up, we're going to shift gears for a moment.
sure.
We spent this conversation breaking down systems, strategy, how to navigate the hiring process with intent. But now I want to step outside of that. So this segment is called Off the Mic, and where the structure drops, the filters come off, and we get to more human side of the conversation. So just short questions and honest answers. So let's
Sure.
see what happens.
Okay.
So you looked at you looked at more resumes than most people have looked at restaurant menus. What would your own resume say under special skills if we made it brutally honest?
Ooh, my special skill? um, well, I think that for me, I've I'm a big people person, right? Like I know how to understand, and I believe that is kind of how I got involved with hospitality, is just thinking, okay, like when I was young, I actually have a hospitality degree. And I'm just like, I want to go and where everyone is having fun and vacationing. So that was my motivation back then. So I think part of my expertise, you know, I definitely feel like my superpower is really just like truly understanding people, what they struggle with, getting out of them what they might not see in themselves, right? And I think that I've learned that doing what I do now, is that there's we tend to have this not negative, but like this way about us, this imposter syndrome to think, you know, I'm not as good as I say, like, know that I am, right? Or like somebody will comment on a resume that I send them like for a first draft, and they're like, "That are you sure that's even me?" I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. And like understanding that, and getting people to see that, I definitely think is something I do very good at.
Okay. You say a resume should be a sales document, not a memoir. So if your life were a memoir, what would the title be?
Oof. um I guess my memoir would say memory maker or experience maker. I think that again, if I look back at like what I used to do in hospitality, I was in more of the catering sales and events space where I was helping people, put together, especially on the social side, very important days. So planning a lot of weddings and, celebratory type of things. So like I instinctively kind of have that need to create those memories. And I think hospitality does that in itself. But I also think even now, from what I do, that bleeds over a little bit to be like, I am helping people create memories of success and like understanding their superpowers and like truly coming into their own from a career professional, point of view where you go along in your profession. I just think you're just like, well, I've done that and I've done that. And this is just my long, laundry list of everything I'm done at. But you really don't a lot of times see what that true success, strength, value that you have is. And I think for me, like helping people, I kind of like we just alluded to, but like making that memory for them is really special for me.
Terrific. Coming from hospitality world, who would survive longer in a chaos? A hotel GM during a sold-out weekend, or a recruiter with 400 applications and a hiring manager who wants a unicorn?
The GM, the GM, I mean, because honestly, and like I said, worked in hotels for 20 years. Like that happens all the time, right? Like you just kind of like learn how to manage that. And then you look back and you're like, wow, how did I do that? And I'm like, but you do, right? And like you obviously have a lot of people to support you, but I think GMs are, that's just kind of what they're good at.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if I'm, looking for a purple unicorn, that like that's not so systematic. That is humanistic, right?
Yeah.
And there's a difference there for sure in recruiting is it's all very people focused. And, you know, I work with two sides, right? I work with
Yeah.
the hiring manager, the company and the candidate. And you could have either one of them just like blow up the whole deal, or ghost you or make a decision that is not in your favor. And that is really hard to learn. So I think that is harder. Although
Yeah.
I've never been a GM, so they might disagree with me.
Anyway, good answer. So, if ATS systems had personalities, what kind of nightmare colleagues would they be in the office?
Man, they would be those colleagues would be black and white. They would have no room for no gray. They would just be this is a system, this is how we do it. I don't want to hear anything else. It's my way or the highway, and if
Yeah.
you don't like it, then you can move on.
We've seen that, haven't we? You have 20 years. I had a little bit more than that. We've seen those
Yeah.
during
And
the
yeah,
time.
those are hard. Those are the ones that have been
Yeah.
stuck in the same role for way too long.
Yeah, exactly. What is more exhausting, a badly written resume, corporate jargon, or somebody saying that they are result-driven thought leader with a proven track record?
A bad resume,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
especially in recruitment, what I do and with an agency more than I do from like I don't work at ABC company and only find people for those roles, but I represent people, right? And so both sides. So if I'm working for a client because that's who pays me, right? And so for me, it's super important for me to bring very polished, very put together professional people to them, especially in we do a lot with high level C-suite roles and management and up. So if you've got a bad resume, I'm going to ask you to redo it.
Yeah. Yeah. If your coffee ordered your resume for you, what would it say? High impact, strategic, or please do not schedule meetings before this is finished?
um, I would say strategic and high impact. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You talk about the hidden job market. What is one hidden talent or gloriously useless skill you have that deserves more market visibility?
Oh my gosh. I can tell you one thing that I don't have. um, that needs more visibility. That's a good one. Um, I have a knack for just like, especially for what I do now, I think I I can see things through from the bird's eye level from what I do because I set in the both sides of the world. So I think that getting people to understand my true knowledge of vision that I can see that can help them across both sides of that platform, especially in hospitality, and you layer that in, right? I think that kind of knowledge is sometimes hard for me to get across to people, even though I really think I have a good grasp on that now.
Very good. Okay, I have two more questions. The question I have, one of them is that you recall one of those first interviews you went in for a job. Can you explain how it went and what were some things that you remember about that interview?
Oh gosh, you're asking me to go back a long time here.
Yeah, I'll give
Um,
you one too.
yeah. So I don't know really if I can recall specifics, but I can tell you that I during because I mentioned I had gotten a hospitality degree, so part of that was I had to do a 9 month internship, and I from Michigan eventually or originally went to Central Michigan University, and I so I went down to what was the Amelia Island plantation in Florida. I think it's an Omni now, and I got all this great, experience being an intern in a couple different departments. And I was just like, okay, like I'm sold, like this is it. Like I'm not gonna go back. I want to stay in Florida. This is where I need to be. And so I got a chance to interview for my very first like real big girl job in hospitality, working for the Breakers Resort. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's very,
Yeah.
very luxury, it's in Palm Beach, Florida. And that like was stressful. Again, because, like it was just so high end, a little bit hoity toity, but like
Mm.
that interview, I remember her name was Pat. And she had been in that role forever. And she was
Yeah.
just like, like, I know that you have a degree, but like, I think she asked me, like, why would I hire you? And I don't think
Oh.
anyone prepared me for that, right? 'Cause you're
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, well, I like people and I've had 9 months of experience as an internship, so you should definitely hire me. And, I don't know if that's what I
Yeah.
said exactly, but I think I had to convince her, because again, a place like that doesn't just take anybody. That was like very
Yeah. Yeah.
pinpointed and hand selected, but I must have done a good job. I got the
Very good.
job. So,
Well, well, I'll tell you my first interview. I still remember it because I applied for a job in what is nowadays called a boutique hotel in an old manor house, and it requires three-piece suit and to be look very sharp. And so the general manager called me in for the discussion. So he pointed out to a guitar against the wall. He said, "Do you play guitar?" I said, "Yeah, I play guitar." "Okay, why don't you play me a song?" So I played for quite a bit, so I enjoyed doing that. Basically, my interview was playing that song for him. So he basically was observing me how I played it and how I emotionally got myself involved in that song and how I was trying to convey something, and that was getting me the job. He never asked me because he knew that I have never worked in a hotel before, so this was my first experience working in a reception. None of that. So I think he was looking for somebody who can relate to people and a people person, I guess. So and so that's how I got my first job.
wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
different.
that's an interesting story for sure.
Yeah. Well, and the final experience I have was I was interviewed for a higher position, GM's position, and there was no actual interview. I was invited for lunch.
Mm.
Basically, they were observing how my manners in eating,
Yeah.
table
Well, I
etiquette.
mean, but think about that. That's hospitality. Like, if you just are
Yeah,
clueless around other people and, like, you don't have any etiquette, then you're not going to be good.
yeah,
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 that's
exactly.
great. That's so fun.
Oops. Okay, so I think that's wraps up our conversation, Megan. So, and I really appreciate you took the time, and thanks for bearing with me with these quirky questions also.
Sure, sure. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat and share my knowledge with those that are looking for jobs, and in that job search. I know it can be hard, so just kind of keep your head up if you are in that and struggling. And like I said, if I can help you, in any way, you know where to find me.
Excellent. Well, to all the viewers and listeners, I highly recommend that you contact Megan. She has a great insight into recruitment, and oh boy, has that changed from the time I was applying for my jobs playing guitar. But it has become very different. So remember, no memoirs. You have to be very strategic, and I'm sure Megan can help you along the way to be successful in your career.